The telegram arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late March of 1882, and Catherine Violet's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped it into the dusty street of Ash Fork, Arizona Territory. The words blurred through her tears, but their meaning burned clear. Her father was selling her to settle his gambling debts, and Augustus Thornton would arrive in 3 days to claim his bride. Catherine stood frozen outside the general store, the Arizona sun beating down mercilessly on her bonnet as townspeople passed by without a second glance. At 21 years old, she had always known this possibility existed. Her father, Samuel Violet, had been a successful ranch owner once, but whiskey and cards had stripped away everything except their small house on the edge of town, and his remaining shred of paternal authority over her. Now even that authority had been bartered away to a man she had never met, a cattle baron from Wyoming Territory who apparently collected wives the way other men collected horses. She crumpled the telegram in her fist and walked quickly toward home, her worn boots kicking up little clouds of red dust with each step. The house came into view, its paint peeling and shutters hanging crooked, a testament to years of neglect. Inside, she found her father slumped at the kitchen table, an empty bottle beside him and the stench of stale alcohol heavy in the air. "You sent for me." Catherine's voice came out harder than she intended, but she had no softness left to give him. Samuel Violet looked up with bloodshot eyes. "You got the telegram then. 3 days. You gave me 3 days to prepare to marry a stranger. Augustus Thornton is a wealthy man, Catherine. You will want for nothing, except love, except choice, except any say in my own future." She threw the crumpled telegram onto the table. "How much did he pay for me? What is the going rate for a daughter these days?" Her father flinched but said nothing. Catherine felt the rage building in her chest, hot and suffocating. "I will not do this. I will leave town before I let you sell me like livestock. Where would you go?" Her father's voice carried a hint of his old authority, the voice that had commanded ranch hands and made business deals. "You have no money, no family besides me. You think you can survive alone out here. This is a hard land, Catherine. Augustus will provide for you. You will have security. I would rather face rattlesnakes and desert heat than marry a man I do not love." But even as she said it, Catherine knew the truth of her situation. She had $17 to her name, no skills beyond basic housekeeping and the ranching knowledge she had picked up as a girl, and nowhere to go. The Arizona Territory was not kind to women alone. Still, the thought of submitting to this arrangement made her stomach turn. That evening, Catherine sat on the small porch of their house and watched the sun set over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She tried to imagine what Augustus Thornton looked like, whether he would be cruel or kind, old or young. The telegram had revealed nothing except his intention to arrive on Sunday afternoon. Sleep came fitfully that night. Catherine dreamed of running, of saddling her father's old mare and riding until the desert swallowed her whole. But morning came too quickly, bringing Friday's harsh light and the reality that she had only 2 days left. She spent the morning mechanically cleaning the house, washing what few nice clothes she owned, and trying not to think about Sunday. Around noon, she walked into town to buy thread and needles, thinking she might at least mend the tear in her best dress before meeting her unwanted husband. The general store was busy, filled with ranch hands stocking up on supplies and housewives comparing prices on flour and sugar. Catherine moved through the aisles in a daze, barely noticing the conversations around her until a deep voice broke through her fog. "Excuse me, miss. I believe you dropped this." She turned to find a man holding out her small coin purse, which must have slipped from her pocket. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his dusty hat. His eyes were a startling shade of green, and when he smiled, Catherine felt something shift in her chest. "Thank you," she managed, taking the purse from his calloused hand. "I did not even notice." Easy to do in a crowded place. He tipped his hat politely. "Preston Irving. I just arrived in Ash Fork this morning. Catherine Violet." The words came automatically, though she wondered if she should even bother with introductions. In 3 days, her name would change anyway. Something in her expression must have betrayed her thoughts because Preston's smile faded slightly. "Forgive me for saying so, Miss Violet, but you look like someone carrying the weight of the world." Catherine laughed, but it came out bitter. "Is it that obvious? I have spent enough time reading the desert to know when something is not quite right." He hesitated, then added, "I do not mean to pry, but if you need help with something, I am a fair hand at solving problems." She studied him for a long moment, this stranger with kind eyes and an open face. What could she possibly tell him? That she was being sold into marriage, that she needed rescuing like some damsel in a dime novel. The thought was absurd. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Irving, but I doubt you could help with this particular problem. Some things cannot be solved with a gun or a strong back. Try me." Catherine glanced around the store, then lowered her voice. "My father has promised me in marriage to a man I have never met. He arrives on Sunday to collect his bride. There. Now you know the shameful truth of the desperate Catherine Violet." Preston's jaw tightened. "Your father cannot do that. You are a grown woman, not property. Try telling him that. Or better yet, try telling Augustus Thornton when he arrives with whatever money he has already paid." She shook her head. "I should not have said anything. Please forget I mentioned it." She turned to leave, but Preston's voice stopped her. "What if you were not here when he arrived?" "What? This Augustus Thornton. What if you were not here on Sunday when he came to collect his bride?" Preston stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "You could leave. Go somewhere he would never find you. With what money, what resources? I have nothing, Mr. Irving. My father made sure of that. You have yourself. That is more than nothing." Preston's green eyes held hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Look, I know we just met, and you have no reason to trust me. But I came to Ash Fork looking for work, and I am heading west toward California eventually. If you need to get away from here, I could take you somewhere safe." Catherine's mind reeled. Was this stranger seriously offering to help her escape? It was insane. It was dangerous. It was also the only real option she had been presented. Why would you do this for someone you just met? Preston was quiet for a moment, then said, "My sister was forced into a marriage she did not want. I was too young to help her then, only 14 and working as a ranch hand in Texas. She died 2 years later, broken by a man who saw her as property. So when I see a woman in the same situation, I guess I see a chance to do what I could not do for Sarah." The raw pain in his voice convinced Catherine of his sincerity more than any flowery words could have. She made a decision that would change everything. "If I agree to this, we would need to leave before Sunday. Saturday night, perhaps, after my father has drunk himself to sleep. I can be ready. I have a good horse and enough supplies for 2. We would need to ride hard to put distance between us and Ash Fork before they realize you are gone. He will come after me. My father or Augustus Thornton or both. Let them try." Preston's voice held a steel edge. "By the time they figure out which direction we went, we will be long gone." Catherine felt a flutter of something she had not experienced in months. Hope. It was fragile and frightening, but it was real. "Where would we go?" "I was heading to California, like I said, but we could go anywhere. North to Colorado, south to Mexico, west to the coast. Your choice, Miss Violet." "Catherine." If we are going to do this mad thing, you should call me Catherine." Preston smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Catherine it is, and you can call me Preston or just Press if you like. Most of my friends do." "I do not have many friends anymore," Catherine admitted. "My father's reputation has seen to that." "Well, you have at least one now." Preston extended his hand and Catherine shook it, feeling the rough warmth of his palm against hers. "Meet me at the old cottonwood tree on the north edge of town, the one by the dry creek bed. Do you know it?" "I do." "Saturday night around midnight. Bring only what you can carry easily. We will need to move fast once we start riding." Catherine nodded, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I will be there. And Preston, thank you for giving me a choice when no one else would." "Everyone deserves a choice about their own life." He tipped his hat again. "Until Saturday night, then." Catherine watched him leave the general store, his tall frame moving with easy confidence through the crowd. What had she just agreed to? Running away with a stranger into the desert night. It was the kind of reckless decision she had never made in her careful, cautious life. But what other option did she have? Marry Augustus Thornton and lose herself entirely. She purchased her thread and needles mechanically, her mind already racing ahead to Saturday night. What should she bring? How could she move around the house without alerting her father? Where would she and Preston go once they left Ash Fork? The next day and a half passed in a strange blur. Catherine went through the motions of her daily life while secretly preparing for her escape. She packed a small bag with her sturdiest clothes, a few precious items from her mother who had died years before, and what little money she had. She acted normally around her father, though every interaction felt like a lie. Saturday morning, Samuel Violet seemed almost cheerful as he prepared the house for Augustus Thornton's arrival the next day. "You will see, Catherine. This will be good for both of us. Mr. Thornton has agreed to pay off all my debts and give you a comfortable home. What more could you want?" Love, Catherine thought but did not say. Respect, freedom. A life I choose for myself. Instead, she simply nodded and continued sweeping the floor. Let him think she had resigned herself to this fate. In less than 12 hours she would be gone. That evening felt endless. Catherine ate a silent dinner with her father, cleaned the dishes, and retired to her small room early, claiming exhaustion. She lay in her narrow bed fully dressed, listening to her father move around the house. She heard him pour himself drink after drink, heard his footsteps become heavier and less steady, heard him finally stumble to his own room around 10 o'clock. Catherine waited another hour, her packed bag clutched in her arms, barely breathing as she listened for any sign that her father was still awake. The house remained silent except for his heavy snoring. At 11:30, she could wait no longer. Moving as quietly as possible, Catherine slipped out of her room and crept through the dark house. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the silence. She paused at her father's door, listening to make sure he was still asleep. The snoring continued, steady and deep. She made it to the front door and eased it open, wincing at the slight squeak of the hinges. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her. For a moment, Catherine stood frozen, half expecting her father to come bursting out after her. But the house remained dark and quiet. She had done it. She was really leaving. Catherine hurried through the sleeping town, keeping to the shadows and avoiding the main street where the saloon still spilled light and noise into the night. The walk to the old cottonwood tree felt like it took forever, though it could not have been more than 15 minutes. As she approached the dry creek bed, she saw a figure waiting beneath the massive tree, and relief flooded through her. Preston stepped forward when he saw her. "You came." "I was not sure you would actually go through with it. I had to. This is my only chance." Catherine realized she was shaking, whether from cold or nerves or excitement she could not tell. "Are you certain about this? Once we ride out, there is no going back." "I am certain. Where is your horse?" "Hidden just beyond those rocks." Preston took her bag and gestured for her to follow him. As they walked, he added, "I got us a second horse this afternoon. Nothing fancy, but she is strong and steady. I figured you would need your own mount." "You bought me a horse." Catherine stopped walking. "Preston, I cannot pay you back for that." "I do not recall asking you to." He smiled at her in the moonlight. "Consider it an investment in our mutual freedom. Besides, I could not very well expect you to ride double all the way to wherever we end up." Two horses waited in the shelter of a cluster of large boulders, already saddled and loaded with supplies. Preston had clearly been preparing all day. He helped Catherine mount the smaller of the two horses, a roan mare with intelligent eyes. "Her name is Rosie, according to the man who sold her to me. She has got good endurance and a calm temperament." Catherine patted the mare's neck, feeling a rush of affection for this stranger who had thought of everything. "Thank you, Preston, for all of this. Thank me when we are safely away from here." He swung up onto his own horse, a tall bay gelding. "We will head northwest toward Prescott at first. It is the opposite direction from where most people would expect us to go. Then we can decide where to head from there." They rode out of Ash Fork at a steady pace, not fast enough to draw attention but quick enough to cover ground. Catherine looked back only once, seeing the scattered lights of the town fade into the darkness behind them. Somewhere in that darkness was her father's house, her old life, and the future that had been chosen for her. She turned forward and did not look back again. The night ride felt surreal, like something from a dream. The desert stretched out around them, silver in the moonlight, full of strange shadows and distant sounds. Catherine had never been out alone at night like this, and everything felt both frightening and exhilarating. Preston rode beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks or checking their direction by the stars. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they stopped to rest the horses near a small spring Preston somehow knew was there. Catherine dismounted stiffly, her legs aching from hours in the saddle. "We should rest here for a few hours," Preston said, loosening his horse's girth. "Let the horses drink and graze. We will ride again this afternoon and through the night if you are up for it. I can manage." Catherine knelt by the spring and splashed cool water on her face, washing away the dust of the ride. "How far have we come?" "Maybe 25 miles, give or take. Not enough yet. They will discover you are gone this morning when your father wakes up. By afternoon, they will be organizing a search party." The reality of their situation settled over Catherine like a heavy blanket. "What if they catch us?" "They will not." Preston's voice held absolute certainty. "I have spent years tracking cattle across open range and learning every trick the land can teach. I know how to cover our trail and where to go to make tracking difficult. Trust me, Catherine, I will keep you safe." She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. "What do we do if we encounter anyone?" "We are married, heading west to start a new life in California. That story is common enough that no one will question it. Keep your head down and let me do most of the talking if we meet anyone." "Married." Catherine felt her cheeks heat despite the cool morning air. Preston looked slightly uncomfortable. "In theory only, of course. Just for the story, to keep people from asking too many questions. A woman traveling alone with a man who is not her husband would draw attention we do not want." "Right." "Of course. That makes sense." Catherine busied herself unpacking some food from her bag, not wanting Preston to see her face. Why had the word married made her heart skip like that? This was a rescue mission, not a romance. Preston was helping her escape, nothing more. They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and hardtack, Then Preston insisted Catherine try to sleep for a few hours while he kept watch. She protested at first, but exhaustion won out. Using her bag as a pillow and her shawl as a blanket, she curled up in the shade of a large rock and fell into a deep sleep. She woke to Preston gently shaking her shoulder. The sun now passed its zenith in the afternoon sky. Time to move on. How are you feeling? Sore, Catherine admitted, sitting up and stretching her stiff muscles, but ready to keep going. They rode through the afternoon and into the evening, heading generally northwest, but taking a winding route that would make them harder to follow. Preston seemed to have an instinct for the land, finding game trails and rocky paths that hid their tracks. As night fell again, they kept riding by moonlight. "Tell me about yourself," Preston said during one of their brief rest stops. "If we are going to be traveling companions, I should know more about you than just your name." Catherine considered the question. "There is not much to tell. I am 21, my mother died when I was 12, and I have spent the last 9 years watching my father drink away everything we had. I used to help run the ranch when I was younger, before we sold off most of the cattle and land. I can rope and brand and doctor sick livestock, though I suppose those skills will not help much wherever we end up. You might be surprised, California has plenty of ranches." Preston passed her a canteen of water. "What did you want to be before all this happened? Before your father made his deal?" No one had ever asked Catherine that question before. She thought about it as she drank. "I wanted to train horses. My mother was good with horses, and she taught me before she died. There was something magical about working with a green horse and watching it learn to trust you, to respond to the lightest touch. I dreamed of having my own training operation someday." "That is a good dream. Maybe you still can, somewhere else, somewhere you can start fresh." "Maybe." Catherine handed back the canteen. "What about you? You said you were heading to California. What are you looking for there? Honestly, I am not entirely sure. I worked cattle in Texas until I was 20, then spent a few years drifting around, trying different work and seeing different places. I am 26 now, and I figure it is time to settle somewhere and build something real. I heard California has opportunities for men willing to work hard. Figured I would head that direction and see what I find." "You left out the part about rescuing foolish women from arranged marriages." Preston laughed. "That was not exactly planned, but I do not regret it. You are not foolish, Catherine, you are brave. It takes courage to choose the unknown over the certain, even when the certain is terrible." They rode on, and as the hours passed, Catherine found herself relaxing into the journey. Preston proved to be easy company, with a quiet competence that made her feel safe and stories that made her laugh despite their situation. He told her about his years working cattle, about the characters he had met, and the places he had seen. She found herself opening up in return, sharing memories of her mother and the ranch as it used to be. By the time they stopped to camp the second night, exhaustion had settled deep into Catherine's bones. They were in rougher country now, foothills dotted with pine trees and granite outcroppings. Preston found a sheltered spot among the rocks where they could risk a small fire to warm some food. "We have put good distance between us and Ash Fork," he said, as they ate beans heated over the flames. "Another few days and we will be far enough that even if they are looking, they would not find us easily. You think Augustus Thornton will give up? Hard to say. Depends how much pride he has and how much money he paid your father. But either way, the territory is big and we are covering ground fast. He would need to be an exceptional tracker to follow us now." Catherine stared into the fire, thinking about the man she had never met, the husband she would never have. "I wonder what he was like. Part of me almost wants to know." "Does it matter? I suppose not. Good or bad, kind or cruel, I still would not have chosen him. She looked at Preston across the fire. "I have not properly thanked you for this, for everything. You turned your whole life upside down for a stranger. Not that upside down. I was heading west anyway, just maybe not quite this fast or this far north." Preston stirred the fire with a stick, sending sparks drifting into the night sky. "Besides, you are not exactly a stranger anymore, are you? We have been through enough together in the past few days to count as friends at least." Friends. Catherine liked the sound of that, though she was beginning to realize her feelings toward Preston were becoming more complicated than simple friendship. She had found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way his hands moved with easy confidence handling the horses, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her. It was foolish to develop feelings for him. He was helping her because of his sister's memory, because of his own good heart. That was all. But as they settled down to sleep on opposite sides of the fire, Catherine could not help imagining what it would be like if their pretend marriage were real. The next day brought an unexpected complication. They had been riding for about 3 hours when they crested a ridge and saw a small ranch spread out in the valley below. Smoke rose from the chimney of a modest house, and horses grazed in a corral. "We should go around," Catherine said nervously. But Preston was studying the scene below with a thoughtful expression. "Actually, I think we should stop there." "What? Why would we do that?" "Because we need supplies. We have been riding hard for 3 days and the horses need proper rest and grain, not just grazing. Plus, avoiding every settlement we come across will just slow us down in the long run." He looked at her seriously. "Remember what I said. We are a married couple heading to California. We need to start acting like it or people will remember us as suspicious." Catherine's stomach fluttered nervously, but she saw the logic in his words. "All right, but you do the talking." They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the ranch, a man emerged from the house. He was middle-aged with graying hair and a weathered face that broke into a friendly smile when he saw them. "Afternoon, folks. You all look like you have been on the trail a while." Preston dismounted and helped Catherine down, his hand warm and steady on her waist. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool mountain air. "That we have," Preston said easily. "My wife and I are heading west to California. We were hoping we might buy some grain for our horses and maybe some fresh supplies if you have any to spare." The rancher's eyes moved between them, taking in their dusty clothes and tired faces. "California, huh? Long journey ahead of you still. I am Marcus Bentley. This is my spread, though it is not much to look at. Preston Irving, and this is my wife Catherine." The lie rolled smoothly off Preston's tongue. "Your place looks just fine to me, Mr. Bentley. Honest work is always something to be proud of." Catherine noted the way Preston had seamlessly adopted the role of her husband, the small possessive touch he kept on her elbow, the way he included her in his glances. It felt disturbingly natural. "Well, any friend of honest work is welcome here. Come on up to the house. My wife Jane will want to meet you. We do not get many travelers through this way." Marcus led them toward the house, calling out, "Jane, we have visitors." A woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40 years old with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Oh my goodness, you poor dears. You look exhausted. Please come in and rest. I have stew on the stove and fresh bread." Catherine felt a pang of guilt at deceiving these kind people, but she followed Preston inside. The house was simple but clean and comfortable, with the homey touches of a place that was well loved. Jane Bentley bustled around, insisting they sit and eat while she peppered them with friendly questions. "How long have you two been married?" Jane asked as she ladled stew into bowls. Catherine froze, but Preston answered without hesitation. Not quite a month, we decided to start our married life with an adventure. How romantic! I remember when Marcus and I first married. We could not wait to start our life together either. Jane beamed at them. You make a lovely couple. Catherine felt her cheeks heat. She focused on her stew, which was delicious and much better than the trail food they had been eating. Beside her, Preston continued chatting easily with the Bentleys, spinning a tale about their courtship and plans for California that sounded so convincing Catherine almost believed it herself. After the meal, Marcus showed Preston where he could purchase grain for the horses and offered to let them sleep in the barn for the night. No sense pushing on when you are both tired. The horses need rest too. Preston looked at Catherine, silently asking if she was comfortable with the plan. She gave a tiny nod. They did need rest, and the Bentleys seemed genuinely kind. That evening, after helping Jane with the dishes and receiving a bag of food supplies for the road, Catherine found herself alone with Preston in the barn. They had spread blankets in the hayloft, far enough apart to be proper, but closer than they had slept before due to the limited space. You are a convincing liar, Catherine said quietly as they settled down for the night. I prefer to think of it as a convincing storyteller. Preston's voice held a smile in the darkness. Besides, the best lies are the ones with truth woven through them. What truth was in your story about us? The part about starting a new life together. That is true, is not it? We are both starting over, just maybe not in the way the Bentleys think. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Preston, what happens when we get to California, or wherever we end up? I cannot pretend to be your wife forever. No, I suppose not. He sounded thoughtful. I guess we figure that out when we get there. One thing at a time, Catherine. Right now, let us just focus on putting distance between you and Ash Fork. But as Catherine lay in the darkness, listening to Preston's breathing even out into sleep, she could not stop thinking about the question she had asked. What would happen when this journey ended? Would Preston simply help her get settled somewhere and then ride off to live his own life? The thought made her chest ache in a way she did not want to examine too closely. She must have eventually fallen asleep because the next thing she knew, Preston was gently shaking her awake in the pre-dawn darkness. Time to go. I want to be on the trail before the Bentleys wake up. Why the rush? Just a feeling. The less people who can track our movements, the better. They saddled their rested horses and rode out as the sky began to lighten. Catherine felt renewed after a full night's sleep and a good meal, ready to face whatever came next. The next several days fell into a pattern. They rode from dawn until midday, rested during the hottest hours, then rode again until dark. Preston continued to choose routes that would be difficult to follow, leading them through rocky terrain and streams that would hide their tracks. They saw few other travelers, and when they did, Preston's story about heading to California proved sufficient to avoid suspicion. Slowly, Catherine began to relax. Maybe they had actually escaped. Maybe Augustus Thornton had decided she was not worth chasing. Maybe she really could start a new life. She should have known it would not be that easy. They were camped in a small canyon, 8 days out from Ash Fork, when Preston suddenly put out their fire and motioned for silence. Catherine froze, her heart hammering. Preston crept to the edge of their camp and peered into the darkness, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "What is it?" Catherine whispered. "Riders. At least 3, maybe more. They are making camp about a mile back the way we came." He returned to her side, his face grim. "Could be nothing. Could be cowboys heading to a job, or it could be someone looking for us. How would they have found us? You have been so careful. Money can hire skilled trackers. If your father or Thornton offered enough, someone might have picked up our trail." Preston began quickly packing their supplies. "We need to move. Now." In the dark, Better that than waiting to see if those riders are looking for us. Come on. They saddled the horses as quietly as possible and led them out of the canyon on foot, not mounting until they were well away from their camp. Then they rode through the moonlit night, pushing the horses faster than was safe on the rocky terrain. Catherine's heart pounded with every step, expecting to hear shouts or gunfire behind them, but the night remained quiet, and as dawn broke, Preston finally allowed them to slow down. They were in thick pine forest now, the air cooler and smelling of resin and earth. "I think we lost them, if they were even following us at all," Preston said, though he kept scanning the forest behind them. "But we should keep moving." "Where are we?" Catherine asked, realizing she had lost track of their location days ago. "If I have been reading the landmarks right, we are somewhere in the mountains south of Prescott, maybe 30 miles or so. We should reach the town in another day or two." "Is it safe to go into a town?" Preston considered. "Safer than staying out here if we are being followed. In a town, we can blend in, maybe catch a stage or join a larger group heading west. Out here, we are exposed." They rode on, and Catherine tried not to think about who might be behind them in the darkness. Instead, she focused on the beauty of the forest around them, so different from the desert country around Ash Fork. Tall pines stretched toward the sky, and birds sang in the branches. It would have been peaceful if not for the constant edge of fear. That afternoon, they came across a small creek and stopped to water the horses. As Catherine knelt to refill their canteens, Preston suddenly grabbed her arm. "Someone is coming. Fast." Catherine heard it now, too, the sound of a horse moving quickly through the forest. Preston pulled her behind a large pine tree, his hand on his gun. They waited, barely breathing, as the sound grew closer. A single rider burst through the trees, a young man on a lathered horse. He pulled up short when he saw their horses by the creek, his eyes wild with panic. "Please, you have to help me. My sister, she fell down a ravine about a mile back. I cannot get her out alone and she is hurt bad." Preston studied the young man carefully. "How did she fall?" "We were riding too fast, not watching the trail. Her horse spooked at a snake and she went over the edge. Please, I am begging you." Catherine stepped out from behind the tree. "We will help." She looked at Preston. "We have to." Preston's jaw was tight, clearly weighing the risks, but he nodded. "Show us where." The young man led them back the way he had come, to a place where the ground dropped away suddenly into a steep ravine. At the bottom, perhaps 20 feet down, a young woman lay motionless. "Sarah," the young man called down. "I brought help." The woman stirred slightly, and Catherine felt relief that she was at least alive. Preston was already studying the ravine, looking for a safe way down. "I will go down and assess her injuries. You two stay up here and figure out how we are going to get her back up." He found a sturdy pine growing near the edge and began carefully descending, using exposed roots and rocks as handholds. Catherine watched anxiously until Preston reached the bottom and knelt beside the injured woman. She could not hear their conversation, but after a moment Preston called up. "Her leg is broken, maybe some ribs too. We need rope to pull her up safely." The young man, who had introduced himself as Thomas, had rope on his saddle. Together, he and Catherine secured it to the pine tree. Preston fashioned a sling of sorts around the injured woman. Then slowly, carefully, they hauled her up. It was hard work, and by the time they got her to the top, Catherine's arms were shaking with effort. The woman, Sarah, was conscious but in obvious pain. She was probably 17 or 18, with dark hair and a pale, frightened face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die down there." "You are going to be fine," Catherine assured her, though she was not at all certain of that. The leg injury looked serious, and they were miles from the nearest doctor. Preston examined Sarah more thoroughly. The leg needs to be splinted before we can move her. Thomas, you said you were riding this way from where? Our family ranch, about 5 miles southeast of here. We were heading to Prescott. Can you ride back and get a wagon? She should not be on a horse with these injuries. Thomas looked torn between staying with his sister and following Preston's instructions. Sarah made the decision for him. Go, Tommy. I will be all right. These people will stay with me. After Thomas reluctantly rode off, Catherine and Preston set about making Sarah as comfortable as possible. Preston used straight branches and strips torn from his spare shirt to splint her leg while Catherine tried to distract her with gentle conversation. That is quite a fall you took, Catherine said. You are lucky you did not break your neck. I know. I do not remember much after I went over, just hitting the ground in pain. Sarah's eyes moved between Catherine and Preston. Are you two married? You seem like you fit together. Catherine felt her cheeks warm. We are traveling together, heading to California. That is a long journey, a hard one too, but I guess anything is worth it if you are with the right person. Sarah's pain-glazed eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. It took Thomas nearly 3 hours to return with a wagon driven by an older man who turned out to be his father. Between the 4 men and Catherine, they managed to carefully lift Sarah into the wagon bed, cushioned with blankets. I cannot thank you enough, Sarah's father said, shaking Preston's hand firmly. You saved my daughter's life. If there is ever anything I can do to repay you, you just name it. No need for repayment. Anyone would have done the same. But Preston's eyes had a distant, sad look, and Catherine realized he was thinking of his own sister, the one he had not been able to save. As the family prepared to head back to their ranch, Sarah's father made an offer. You two should come with us, at least for tonight. Let us give you a proper meal and a warm bed as thanks. It is the least we can do. Preston looked at Catherine, silently asking what she wanted. She knew they should keep moving, put more distance between themselves and anyone who might be following. But the family's gratitude was so genuine, and Preston looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. We would be grateful, Catherine said. The ranch turned out to be a pleasant surprise, a well-maintained property with a comfortable house and obvious signs of prosperity. Sarah's mother, a warm woman named Elizabeth, fussed over them and insisted they have the guest room for the night. That evening, after the doctor from Prescott had come and gone, confirming Preston's field assessment and praising his splinting work, the family gathered for dinner. Sarah was resting comfortably in her room, dosed with laudanum for the pain. So you are heading to California, Sarah's father, Robert, said as they ate. What are your plans when you get there? Preston glanced at Catherine. Still figuring that out. Maybe ranch work, maybe something else. We are keeping our options open. Well, if you are interested in ranch work, you could do worse than staying in Arizona territory. Good cattle country once you know where to look for water and grass. Robert cut into his roast beef thoughtfully. In fact, I am always looking for good hands, and after what you did today, I would be proud to have you working here. Catherine saw something shift in Preston's expression, a consideration he had not had before. That is a generous offer, sir. It is a practical one. I can see you know your way around horses and you have a good head in a crisis. Those are valuable qualities. Robert looked between them. I could offer you a small house on the property, decent wages, and honest work. Think about it at least. That night, lying in the comfortable guest room bed, Catherine stared at the ceiling and thought about Robert's offer. They had been running for over a week, looking over their shoulders, never quite sure if they were safe. The idea of stopping, of settling down somewhere, held a powerful appeal. But was it safe? Were they far enough from Ash Fork? Had they truly escaped, or would Augustus Thornton's reach extend even here? Unable to sleep, Catherine slipped out of the room and found her way to the front porch. The night was cool and clear, stars blazing overhead in the way they only did far from city lights. She was surprised to find Preston already there, leaning against the porch railing. "Could not sleep either?" he asked softly. "Too much to think about." Catherine joined him at the railing, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Preston, do you think we could actually stay here? Stop running and just settle down?" "I have been asking myself the same question." He was quiet for a moment. "Part of me says yes, that we have come far enough, that you are safe now. But another part worries that staying in one place makes you too easy to find if someone is still looking." "I am tired of running," Catherine admitted. "These past days have been exciting in some ways, but also terrifying. I want to know where I will be sleeping tomorrow, to not wonder if every stranger is hunting me." Preston turned to look at her, his green eyes serious in the starlight. "If you want to stay, we can stay. I will do whatever you need to feel safe. But what about your plans?" "California and starting fresh. California will still be there if we decide to go later. And honestly, Catherine, this past week has made me realize something." He hesitated, then continued. "When I offered to help you escape, I thought I was just righting an old wrong, helping someone the way I could not help my sister. But somewhere along the trail, that changed. You stopped being a cause and became someone I care about, someone important to me." Catherine's heart hammered so hard she thought Preston must surely hear it. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I do not want to just drop you somewhere safe and ride away. I want to stay, wherever you are. I want to build something real with you if you will have me." Preston reached out and gently took her hand. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know I have no right to ask this when you just escaped one forced marriage. But Catherine, these days with you have been the happiest I can remember. You are brave and kind and strong, and I think I am falling in love with you." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "You are falling in love with me." "I am. I have been fighting it because I did not want to take advantage of the situation, did not want you to feel pressured. But I cannot keep pretending I am just your traveling companion. You mean more to me than that." "Preston." Catherine's voice came out choked. "I have been feeling the same way. I thought I was crazy developing feelings for you so quickly, but you have given me more than escape. You have given me hope and laughter and made me feel valued in a way no one has in years." Preston's face broke into a wide smile. "So you are saying—" "I am saying that I am falling in love with you too, that I want to stay with you, build a life with you, if that is what you truly want." Instead of answering with words, Preston pulled her close and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, then deepening as Catherine wrapped her arms around his neck. She had never been kissed like this before, with such tenderness and passion combined. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I want to do this right," Preston said, his forehead resting against hers. "Court you properly, marry you for real, not as some cover story. Build a life together that we both choose." "Yes," Catherine whispered. "Yes to all of that." They stood on the porch wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time since receiving that telegram back in Ash Fork, Catherine felt truly free. Not just free from Augustus Thornton and her father's control, but free to choose her own future, her own love, her own life. The next morning they gave Robert their answer. They would stay and work on his ranch. Robert was delighted, and by afternoon he had shown them a small but sturdy house on the property that would be theirs. It needed some work, but it was more than Catherine had dared dream of. Over the next weeks, they settled into their new life. Preston proved to be an excellent ranch hand, and Catherine found herself working with the horses, starting to train some of the younger ones just as she had always dreamed. The work was hard but satisfying, and they fell into an easy partnership. Preston was true to his word about courting her properly. Despite living on the same property, he maintained a respectful distance, calling on her in the evenings to walk or sit on the porch and talk. He brought her wildflowers he found while working and made her laugh with stories. Slowly, the tension of their escape faded, replaced by something deeper and more lasting. 2 months after arriving at the ranch, Catherine received the letter she had been dreading. It was from a lawyer in Ash Fork, informing her that her father had died of a liver ailment related to his years of drinking. There was no mention of Augustus Thornton or any pursuit. The lawyer simply needed to know her whereabouts to settle her father's small estate. Catherine sat on the porch of the little house, the letter trembling in her hands. Preston found her there, tears streaming silently down her face. "What is it? What happened?" He knelt beside her, taking the letter and reading it quickly. "Oh, Catherine, I am so sorry." "I should feel something more," she said brokenly. "He was my father, but all I feel is sad that we could never fix what was broken between us, and relieved that he cannot control me anymore. What kind of daughter does that make me? It makes you human." Preston pulled her into his arms. "You can mourn what you wished he had been while still acknowledging what he actually was. That is not wrong." Catherine cried for the father she had lost long before his death, for the childhood that alcohol had stolen, for all the things that could have been different. And through it all, Preston held her, steady and strong and exactly what she needed. A week later, Preston asked her father's permission to marry her. When Catherine pointed out that this was impossible, he smiled and said he had asked Robert instead, as the closest thing to a father figure she had now. Robert had given his blessing enthusiastically. The proposal itself was simple but perfect. Preston took Catherine riding up into the mountains, to a meadow filled with wildflowers and surrounded by towering pines. There, with the whole valley spread out below them and the sky impossibly blue overhead, he got down on one knee. "Catherine Violet, you are the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You have made me believe in new beginnings and second chances. Will you marry me? For real this time, not as a cover story, but as a true partnership and love that will last the rest of our lives." "Yes," Catherine said, pulling him to his feet and kissing him. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married a month later in a small church in Prescott with Robert's family and a few other ranch hands in attendance. Catherine wore a simple but beautiful dress that Elizabeth had helped her sew, and Preston looked handsome in his best clothes. Sarah, recovered now though with a slight limp, stood up as Catherine's witness. As they exchanged vows, Catherine thought about how far she had come from that desperate woman standing outside the general store in Ash Fork, holding a telegram that had tried to sell her future. She had run toward the unknown and found everything she needed. Their wedding night was spent in the little house on the ranch, and for the first time, Catherine understood what it meant to give yourself to someone you truly loved. Preston was gentle and patient, making sure she felt cherished and safe. In his arms, she discovered joy she had never imagined existed. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Catherine's horse training business began to grow as word spread about her skill. Ranchers from around the area brought her their problem horses, and she worked her magic, teaching the animals to trust and respond. Preston continued working cattle for Robert, but he also helped Catherine with the training, proving to have a gift with horses himself. 2 years after their wedding, Catherine gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Samuel Preston Irving. Holding her son for the first time, Catherine felt the complicated mix of emotions that came with naming him after her father. Preston understood without her having to explain. "You are giving your father the second chance he never gave himself," he said softly, looking at their son with wonder. This Samuel will be raised with love and purpose. Samuel was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth Catherine, named for both her grandmothers. Then another son, Thomas, and finally another daughter, Sarah. The little house grew crowded with children's laughter and love. Catherine's relationship with her own father's memory slowly healed as she learned what real parenthood meant. She understood now that his weakness had been his own, not her failing. And she made sure her children knew they were valued for who they were, not what they could provide. Preston proved to be everything she could have hoped for in a partner. He supported her horse training business as it grew, helped with the children without complaint, and never once made her feel like anything less than his equal. They argued sometimes, of course, as any couple did, but they always worked through it with respect and love. When Samuel was 10, he asked about his grandfather, about the man he had been named for. Catherine and Preston sat him down and told him an age-appropriate version of the truth, that his grandfather had made mistakes, but that everyone deserved to be remembered for more than their worst moments. "You carry his name," Preston told his son, "but you get to decide what that name means. Make it mean something good." The ranch prospered over the years. Robert eventually retired and turned over much of the day-to-day operation to Preston, who proved to be a natural leader. Catherine's horse training operation became known throughout the territory, and she took pride in the work she did. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Preston took Catherine back to that meadow where he had proposed. The children were spending the night with Robert and Elizabeth, giving them a rare evening alone. "I have been thinking about that day in the general store in Ash Fork," Preston said as they sat in the grass, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "About how that moment changed everything. You mean when you decided to help a desperate stranger? When I met the woman I was going to spend my life with." Preston took her hand, his thumb tracing the lines of her palm. "Do you ever regret it, running away like we did? Sometimes I wonder if you would have been better off if I had never interfered, if you had married Thornton and lived a life of wealth and security." Catherine looked at him incredulously. "Are you serious? Preston, you gave me my life back." "No amount of money could compare to having the freedom to choose my own path, to choose you." She squeezed his hand. "I have never regretted a single moment of that wild ride away from Ash Fork. It led me here, to you, to our children, to this life we built together. How could I regret the best decision I ever made? Sometimes I cannot believe you chose me, that out of all the ways things could have gone, we ended up here together." "You rode faster," Catherine said, smiling at the old memory. "You got there first and gave me a choice." "That is all I ever needed." Preston pulled her close and kissed her, deep and sweet, full of the promise they had made 10 years ago and kept every day since. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I love you, Catherine Irving. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that." "I love you too, Preston. Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself. I just provided the horse." Catherine laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The girl who had been promised to another was long gone, replaced by a woman who had chosen her own destiny and found love beyond her wildest dreams. 20 more years passed in what felt like a heartbeat. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took over much of the ranch operation from his father. Elizabeth married a good man from Prescott and started her own family. Thomas discovered a talent for veterinary medicine and began traveling the territory helping sick animals. Sarah, their youngest, inherited her mother's gift with horses and took over the training operation. Catherine and Preston grew older together, their hair graying and faces weathering, but their love never dimming. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, the family tree spreading out in directions neither had imagined that desperate night when they fled Ash Fork. Sometimes Catherine would think about Augustus Thornton and wonder what had become of him. She heard through occasional letters from old acquaintances that he had eventually married someone else, a woman from Denver who seemed content with the arrangement. She hoped it had worked out well for them both. Her father's memory had mellowed over the years into something she could carry without pain. She visited his grave once, years after his death, and left flowers, not because he had earned them, but because she had finally learned to forgive. On Catherine's 65th birthday, the family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house, now much expanded from the small structure Preston had first shown her. As Catherine watched her family laugh and talk and love each other, she felt a profound gratitude for the path her life had taken. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Catherine and Preston sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. The stars blazed overhead, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine and sage. "You remember when I asked if I should run that night at the Bentley Ranch?" Catherine said quietly. "When we did not know if we were being followed. I remember everything about those days. They are burned into my memory." "What made you so sure it would work out, that we would be safe?" Preston was quiet for a long moment. "I was not sure. I was terrified the whole time that I would fail you, that someone would catch us, that I would not be enough to keep you safe. But I knew that doing nothing was not an option. Sometimes you have to ride into the unknown and trust that you will figure it out as you go." "Well, I am glad we figured it out." Catherine took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses and warmth. "I am glad you rode faster and got there first." "Best race I ever won." Preston brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, and the prize was worth every mile. They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had taken a desperate chance and turned it into a lifetime of love. Catherine thought about the telegram that had arrived all those years ago, the one that had tried to seal her fate. In a way, it had sealed her fate, just not in the way anyone had intended. It had set her on a path that led to Preston, to their children, to this life that was more than she had ever dared dream. The bride had been promised to another, but the cowboy had ridden faster and gotten there first. And in getting there first, he had given her the greatest gift of all, the chance to choose her own story, write her own ending, and find love on her own terms. As the years continued to pass, Preston and Catherine remained the center of their growing family. They celebrated weddings and births, mourned losses, and watched the Arizona territory they had fled to eventually become a state in 1912. The little ranch that Robert had built grew into a substantial operation, with Samuel at the helm and Thomas providing veterinary services for the entire region. Catherine's horse training methods were passed down through Sarah, and then to Sarah's children, becoming something of a family legacy. The Irving name became synonymous with quality horse training throughout Arizona, and people came from miles around to learn from them. Preston lived to see his 80th birthday, surrounded by 3 generations of family. Catherine was by his side, as she had been for nearly 50 years. That night, as they lay in bed together, he told her one last time that loving her had been the greatest adventure of his life. "We rode faster," he whispered, his voice weak but content. "And we won." Preston passed peacefully in his sleep that night, his hand still holding Catherine's. At his funeral, the entire community turned out to honor a man who had been known for his integrity, his kindness, and his unwavering love for his wife and family. Catherine grieved deeply, but she took comfort in knowing they had made the most of every moment together. She lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, telling stories of the wild ride from Ash Fork and the love that had bloomed in the midst of fear and uncertainty. On a warm evening in 1925, Catherine sat on the porch of the ranch house, now overseen by her grandson. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Her great-granddaughter, a spirited girl of 12, sat beside her. "Tell me again about how you met grandfather," the girl said, as she had countless times before. Catherine smiled and began the story one more time, her voice carrying across the peaceful evening. She told of telegrams and arranged marriages, of a stranger who had offered help when no one else would, of a midnight ride and the beginning of a great love. "The important thing," Catherine said as she finished, "is that I got to choose. Your great-grandfather gave me that gift, the chance to choose my own life. Never let anyone take that away from you. Your life is yours to write." That night, Catherine went to bed and dreamed of riding through the moonlit desert, a tall cowboy beside her and all the promise of the future ahead. When her family found her the next morning, she had passed peacefully, a slight smile on her face. They buried her beside Preston, under the tall pines she had loved, with a view of the mountains stretching into the distance. The headstone reads simply, "Catherine Violet Irving, beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She chose her own path. The ranch continued for generations after, each new Irving learning the story of how it all began with a desperate escape and a love that defied the odds. The tale became family legend, told and retold, growing slightly with each telling but always maintaining its essential truth. That sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the courage to run toward the unknown. The little house where Catherine and Preston had started their life together was preserved and maintained by the family, becoming a memorial to what they had built. Visitors could still see the simple wooden structure, imagine the young couple starting their life there, and understand that from small beginnings, great things could grow. Samuel Preston Irving, their firstborn son, lived to be 93 years old. In his final days, he told his own children and grandchildren about the parents who had given him his name and his values. He remembered his mother's strength and his father's kindness, and he passed on their legacy of choosing love over convenience, courage over comfort. "Your grandmother was promised to a man she did not know," he would say. "But your grandfather rode faster and got there first, and in doing so, he did not just save her. He gave her the chance to save herself, to choose her own destiny. That is the greatest gift one person can give another, not to rescue them, but to give them the tools to rescue themselves." The story lived on because it mattered. In a time and place where women had few choices, Catherine had found a way to choose. With Preston's help, she had turned a moment of desperation into a lifetime of love. Their descendants never forgot that lesson, and they tried to live up to the example set by their ancestors. The ranch itself became a testament to what two people could build when they worked together, loved deeply, and never gave up on each other. Through droughts and depressions, through wars and changes, the Irving family held fast to the land and to each other, remembering always where they had come from and what it had cost to get there. And sometimes, on clear nights when the stars blazed overhead and the desert wind whispered through the pines, people swore they could see two riders in the distance, galloping across the hills as they had done so long ago. The bride who had been promised to another and the cowboy who had ridden faster, together forever in the land they had made their own. Their story was complete, their circle closed. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. What had begun with a telegram and a desperate escape had become an epic of love, choice, and the courage to write your own story. The Irving family continued to thrive in Arizona, their roots deep in the red soil, their hearts full of the lessons learned from Catherine and Preston. They knew that love was not something that could be bought or arranged or forced. Real love was chosen, fought for, and earned through years of partnership and respect. And they all lived, truly and completely, building on the foundation that two brave souls had laid down in that desperate flight from Ash Fork so many years before. The bride had been promised to another, but the cowboy had ridden faster and got there first, and in doing so had changed not just two lives but generations to come. Their love story was not just their own but belonged to all who came after, a reminder that choosing your own path, no matter how frightening, was always worth the ride.